The Houston Texans are on the clock with the 25th pick in the 2025 NFL Draft. And what will their first selection be? My name is Tyler here with my brother Ryan, and we're going to break down our first 3-round mock draft for the Houston Texans in this upcoming draft. But before we get into that, if you like the content that the Tracy Take puts out and you want to help the channel grow, easiest way is hitting that subscribe button, tackling that bell to get notified when videos come out. And while you're at it, leave a like and a comment. Let us know what you think of these picks and why. And Ryan, let's pull up the Texans draft here. So when we did this mock draft as well, we did a full 3-round mock draft, all 100 picks or so of there for every single team. And we ended up going with Wyatt Milum, the tackle out of West Virginia. He's slated to be a guard on when he comes to playing on Sunday. I will say we did do this before the Senior Bowl as well, and so I think one of the things is just going to be we're going to talk a lot about like some other potential names that could come up. Wyatt Milum could be the guy that's here. Tyler Booker also could be here, as you see. He was taken just a couple picks later in Baltimore, but I think Donovan Jackson is a very real option as he had a great season at Ohio State. Very versatile, especially for a team like Houston. You are going to want a lot of versatility in the offensive lineman that you draft.
Mhm.
Jonas Savaiinaea as well. Very, very solid offensive lineman out of Arizona. And then Gray Zabel as well. He's probably the guy that raised the most amount of
Yeah.
money for himself with his performance in the Senior Bowl. And so we had him going at 60 to Detroit initially. But I think this is a very real possibility that the Texans, if they would like what they see from him at the combine and with interviews, they maybe would want to take him here as well. So, Ryan, I want to throw it over to you. What do you like about Wyatt Milum and some of these other offensive linemen? And lastly, too, let's wrap up with this pick. What other potential selections do you think, or what other potential positions you think they could prioritize here with their first round pick?
Yeah, so for me, the big one is with Wyatt Milum is he just doesn't have the length to play tackle. But with that being said, he's a 4-year starter out of West Virginia. He started as a true freshman, played all 4 years there, and was just really really solid. Just a high IQ football player. Comes in, like, works hard every single day from what you hear from people at West Virginia. And I think, not that this is a bad pick. I think maybe
Yeah.
like going back, we would probably take Gray Zabel at this one. But Wyatt Milum is another really solid, I think, interior offensive lineman. And you can kind of tell strengthening up this O line is something that I think is a really big priority, especially the interior. You have Laramie Tunsil, and Blake Fisher was decent in filling in at right tackle as well. And so you have to think that he'll be better there. The other one that I thought would be interesting was potentially Omarion Hampton, getting a running back, like a stud running back here in this position. I know there's other needs, and Joe Mixon had a good season, but Joe Mixon is getting towards the end of his career. I think if you go and get a guy like Omarion Hampton to be in that backfield, Dameon Pierce experiment hadn't quite worked out, I think, as well as they had hoped. But if you get a guy like Hampton in here, I think that would be a really good compliment to just what CJ Stroud and this offense wants to do. So all in all, I think there's a lot of good picks, not a lot of ways that they can go wrong here with this 25th overall pick. And I think whatever they decide to do will be solid.
Well, and this definitely just does seem like the proper spot for an interior offensive lineman to come off the board. Like guys who are going to kick in to the interior, or just guys who are natural guards, typically aren't at valued nearly as high as like a blue chip receiver or quarterback, for example. And so a lot of those guys typically go later teens into 20s. And with where Texans are picking right now and with their primary need, I think the offensive lineman, particularly an interior offensive lineman with a lot of versatility, is going to be the route that they end up going here. And so curious to see Texans fans what you think of some other potential players that you would like to see them select here. Moving on to their second round pick, another also serious need, I think, for this team is going to be the receiver spot. Stephon Diggs is going to be a free agent, but he's coming off a torn ACL. We obviously are all very aware of Tank Dell, and his 2025 season is probably just in jeopardy based up to the severity of the injury and also the timing of when the injury was as well. So I think getting a very solid receiver contributor that can come in on day one is going to be huge for this Texans team. And Ryan, you're a big fan of Jalen Royals, but
I
there's also
am.
I think this is going to be a very solid option as well here. It's very similar to the offensive line, especially interior offensive line. I think this is going to be about where a lot of these day two receivers start to come off the board. And just like for point of reference, we even had a couple other receivers come off before this. Alec Manor, Jaden Higgins. They were second round picks as well.
Mhm.
And I think that was pretty much it. And so we kind of had a string of these day two receivers go off right around this time.
Yeah, and that so this is really just to pick your flavor. So obviously with Tank Dell's knee dislocation and multiple like ligaments tearing and whatnot, it is heavily in doubt that he will play in 2025. So, but hopefully he can come back and still be a good NFL player, maybe in 2026 and beyond. But Jalen Royals is going to be primarily a slot player. He's going to complement Nico Collins really well. But the other thing that like I think he does well, he runs with the ball well in his hands. But if Tank Dell does come back in future seasons and is able to be the player that he was, I think Jalen Royals would still be able to really fit well into this offense because Tank Dell could be kind of by himself in that Z role, and him and Jalen Royals can move around the formation very, very well. So, very short-handed guy, again, good with the ball in his hands, and just a really solid receiver. And his story is crazy. He was at Georgia Military College and then played football there for a season or two, and then he went
He
to a
was in
try.
Milledgeville.
Yeah, I believe he was in Milledgeville, Georgia,
I
and
might have missed that.
playing at GMC, and then he went to Utah State for like a tryout. And at the tryout, they offered him a scholarship because they were like, "This kid is a ridiculous athlete,"
Oh yeah.
and so it's just a really good story there. If they don't want to go with Jalen Royals, there's a few other guys that I think would work well. Savion Williams in this offense, I think, would be interesting. Ty Felton, another guy. Jack Besh, he fell in this mock draft. Again, we did this before the Senior Bowl. He will probably be taken before this after his performance at the Senior Bowl as well. So it'll be interesting to kind of see what a lot of teams like how a lot of teams rank these wide receivers. But yeah, I think this is going to be the sweet spot for wide receivers.
Yeah, everybody wondering why I reacted that way. I went to the other small school in the tiny town of Milledgeville, Georgia, Georgia College and State University, and so pretty cool actually. So need to see the Milledgeville alum doing well with their lives. Anyways, so final pick here for the Houston Texans, and this is probably going to be the name I'm going to say the most, especially too when it comes to this these third round guys, maybe even second round guys as well. But obviously, you see, I'm a big Falcons fan. I'm also a big Indiana Hoosier fan. I normally don't brag about it until this year, but CJ West is one of the main reasons why we were so good this year and why we were relevant. So to say, I think one of the biggest up and coming defensive tackles in this offseason is potentially he doesn't even make it this far, in my opinion, but because he has a great run grade, he blew up offensive lines throughout the entire season as well. Go watch him even against Ohio State and even against Notre Dame as well too. Notre Dame actually didn't really have that great of a running game outside of obviously the 98-yard Jeremiah Love run. Other than that,
Yeah,
we really
which
shut them
they
down.
did run away from CJ West on that play. That
Yeah,
was
absolutely. And when they try to run out CJ West won. And I
yeah.
think this would be a great addition to this defensive line here in Houston, especially too. I mean, when you go look at Will Anderson is on the stepping stones of like that pinnacle or is on the pinnacle of that elite edge rusher, like that TJ Watt, Miles Garrett level. Like if he keeps having this types of
Mhm.
performances as well. And you still have Daniil Hunter, who he is on the back end of his career, yes, but I think his stats, I think Daniil Hunter also had double digit sacks this past year as well to go along with Daniil Hunter. So if you get a stud, especially run stuffing guy like CJ West, who has a lot of pass rushing upside, he graded well pass rushing also. I think that this would be an amazing addition to the Houston Texans defensive line.
Yeah, and he did really well at the East West Shrine Bowl. A lot of teams were
Yep.
really impressed, not just with his athleticism and physicality, but he actually had like pass rush plans and was able to set up offensive linemen kind of throughout the week and do a really good job of more of the mental side of the game instead of just being a dominant physical force there in the middle. So I think
Exactly.
that's really good value. We're going to see a lot of these guys at this point in the draft. They could go a few other ways. I think Xavier Restrepo was a guy whose stock might have fallen ever so slightly out of the Senior Bowl. I think he kind of solidified himself as like a mid to late day two guy if they don't get Jalen Royals at their second round pick. CJ or this could be a spot for him there as well. Barrett Carter invest in that linebacker room, or Emory Jones Jr., the offensive line, the right tackle from LSU, who's most likely going to kick into guard
Yeah.
at the next level. So there's a lot of options for the Texans. The biggest thing for me, and this was one thing that we kind of talked about in our Texans season recap. So if you haven't seen that video, go check it out. But they just need to do a good job of building the supporting cast, because they have the stars. They have the Daniil Hunter, the Will Anderson, the Derek Stingley Jr., Nico Collins, CJ Stroud, Laramie Tunsil. Like, they have all of those pieces that you need to go and win a Super Bowl. What they don't have is that strong supporting class that is really gonna not just allow those guys to really shine, but allow them to do their jobs at a really high level and not have to make up for other guys on the roster. So I think for me, this is that like supporting class, draft class, where it's not going to be, you're not going to get your face of the franchise. You're not going to get your like stud, sexy skill position player or whatnot. But what you are going to get are guys that are going to come in, they're going to be monsters in the trenches. And I think that is exactly what the Texans need out of this draft class.
Yeah. No, and this is, I think this is extremely solid. You know, if you go
Yeah.
best interior offensive line with your first pick, you get the very solid receiver with your second pick, and then just like another great player available or a guy to help out your stars once again. I agree. I think this would be a solid draft class, but also too, we're supposed to say that because we made these picks. So let
Yeah,
us
we
know
did.
if you disagree with us.
Yeah. So let's go ahead. Let's wrap up this video here. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and like and subscribe. That is the best way to help out the channel. While you're down there, leave a comment on what you thought of this Houston Texans 3-round mock draft. Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you have done differently? And other than that, we'll see you guys next time.